Right now, we have our bow, but we need to also create arrows that will be shot from our bow. So what we need to do is go to our projects tab in the assets, in the prefabs. You will find that we have the arrow as well as the arrow parent game objects. Now the arrow parent game object we are going to use later to create an arrow that will fly when we shoot our bow and we let go of our bowstring. For now, we need to create a representation that will be created when we pull the string so that we can see an arrow ready to be shot from our bow. And for this, we are going to use this arrow prefab. So let's drag this arrow as a child object of our midpoint visual object. Now in the scene view, it will be very small because we have scaled our midpoint visual object. So right now, what we can do is select the scale in the transform of the midpoint visual object. Let's reset to be 1 uniformly, and we can of course remove the cube, mesh filter, mesh renderer, and the box collider since we do not need those anymore. Now if you want to keep the midpoint grab object for the visualization purpose where you can grab this object, you can leave it, or you can simply scale it non-uniformly. So let's scale it on the, I think, on the X and on the Z. And we have this kind of smaller version of our cube. Maybe let's give it on the Y scale too. And now we have this point where we should be able to grab this object. Now for our arrow, let's select it and let's reset this position 0 and 0. And we have our arrow attached to our bow. Now what I want to do, since the arrow right now is sticking right through our bow, I want to use the red axis to push it upwards a bit. Okay, and I want it just to be above the bow, so it is a bit more realistic that we are shooting the arrow and it is not going through the bow. Now again, I have moved the arrow and not the midpoint visual object. Remember that because if you move the midpoint visual object, the position of it will be reset to 0, 0, and the Z value will change, so the arrow would reset again to go through the bow. Now the arrow itself, object, we need to select it since it has a collider on it. We want to disable the collider. This is just the visualization of the arrow. The collider will be useful later when we create an arrow that is the projectile that we shoot from our bow. Now, we are not going to test our project just yet. Let's select our midpoint visual object and let's disable it. We are going to only show the arrow when we are pulling the bow, the string of the bow, and we are going to hide it where we are letting go of the bow string, because later on we are going to spawn a rigid body based arrow that will actually fly towards its target. To create it, we need to select our scripts folder and we need to reopen our bowstring controller. So let's do that now. Great. We are going to add a float, a variable, private float strength. Now this will be the strength with which we are going to shoot an arrow based on the limit and on the position 0. So we need to know how fast or how strong or with what velocity we should shoot the arrow when we are pulling our string to make it appear that the bow is a bit realistic, that if we pull the string only a bit, the arrow will only fly a bit forward. Now besides that, we need to inform other scripts that we have released our string or that we are pulling it. So we're going to create 2 public Unity events. So public Unity event, right click on this quick action and you need to be using Unity engine.events. One will be on bow pulled or on string pulled. Basically, this is the event when we are starting to pull our string, and basically this is where we are going to enable our arrow visualization so that we have the arrow ready to be shot on the bow. The second event will be public Unity event that takes a float value on bow released. This is when we let go of the string of the bow. We're going to pass to it the strength that we have calculated, and this will be the moment where we are going to shoot a rigid body based arrow from our bow. We're going to work on it in the next video. For now, we just want to have the basic functionality here to make it work. Let's slide it down. Awake and start remains unchanged. Now we need to select the reset bow string. This happens on select exit event, so when we let go of the string. Here at the top we are going to add on bow released _.invoke. So we want to invoke this event, and we're going to pass the strength as the input value for this event. Next, we want to reset the strength to be 0, so the value is not kept on when we again pull the string. Next, we need to find the _prepare_bowstring method, and here we are going to call onBowPulled?_.invoke. So we are going to invoke this event. So we want to make the arrow appear when we are pulling the bow, so the arrow visualization basically, to make it appear like we have the arrow ready to be shot from our bow. Great! Now in the update, in those methods, we are performing different calculations. So first we are going to select the handle pulling string method. Here, this happens when we are in between the point 0 and the limit of our string, so calculating strength will be a bit tricky. So strength will be equal to a method called remap. We're going to pass here the midpoint local z abs, and next we are going to pass the 0 to bowstring stretch limit. So this is our range for the bow, and we want to remap those values to the range 0 and 1. So we have 5 parameters: the midpoint local z abs, 0, bowstring stretch limit, 0, and 1. If you have this typed, right-click on the remap method, quick action, and generate this method. Now we are going to call the first parameter to be just simply value. Next, we are going to have the first one will be from min. So this is the range that we have, and from max will be the third argument, and the 2 remaining arguments will be 2 minimum and 2 maximum. So 2 max. Okay, and now I'm going to paste here the code that will recalculate the value from the range from min from max to the range to min to max. And this is just return a value minus from min divided by from max minus from min. And now this whole thing will be multiplied by 2 max minus 2 min plus 2 min. Okay, this was the most difficult one to handle, because in the handle string pulled back to limit, we obviously want to set the strength to be simply 1, and in the handle string pushed back to start, we basically are resetting our string, so strength will be simply 0. And this is it. So now we had to create this in the script. Now we need to save this, and we are going to work on another script that will actually later on release an arrow. So let's save this script. Let's go back to Unity. Now, if you select your _bow_evil object, you will see that the bowstring controller has 2 events: onBowPulled and onBowReleased, that sends single or basically float value. We need to have another script, so let's right-click in the assets in the scripts folder, create a C# script. We're going to call it arrow controller. And let's open this script. Great. Let me paste the code here that we are going to be using. It is pretty short. We're going to have a serialized field private game object midpoint visual. So this is our red cube that we have removed, and we have added an arrow as a child of it. We're going to have a public void prepare arrow method that will simply set midpoint visual set active to be true. And we're going to have a public void release arrow that takes in float strength value, and it will in turn set midpoint visual set active to be false. So basically we are going to disable our arrow visualization, and we are going to for now debug.log a $sign that allows us to put an argument here in the string bow strength is, and we're going to pass the strength. Great. If you have this script ready, let's save this. Let's go back to Unity. Okay. Let's select our _bow_evil. We're going to minimize bowstring controller for now, and we're going to drag here our arrow controller game component. Next, we need to pass here midpoint visual. This will be our disabled midpoint visual object. Great. Now we are going to extend the bowstring controller because we need to assign methods from our arrow controller to the events here. So let's add listener using this plus icon to both of those. Let's assign our arrow controller to both of those, and we are going to select onBowPulled event. We're going to select no function, arrow controller, and we have prepared arrow method. So let's select this. Next, onBowRelease event, we are going to select no function, the arrow controller, and this is important. Select from the top the release arrow. Those are the methods that takes in the float value as a parameter. So we want to select the release arrow from the top here. Okay, with this all done, we should now be able to press play. Okay, so if everything went well, we should be able to now pick up our bow, and when we pull our string, we should see that there is our arrow. Now the cube that I have set isn't set correctly because I meant it for it to just stay, so this should supposed to be the visual object, not the grabbable object. But as you can see, now we have our arrow. When we let it go, it disappears. So the next thing that we need to do is to actually add an arrow that will be shot from our bow, so the projectile that is rigid body based, that will later on stick to those targets. To quickly fix the issue with the midpoint staying in my hand, I'm going to simply copy this game object, paste it as a child of my midpoint visual. I'm going to make sure that it is a child of it. I'm going to remove the mesh renderer and the box collider from the game object that is called midpoint grab object, and from the copy of it, I'm going to rename it to be the visual. And I'm going to remove from it the XR grab interactable, and I'm going to remove from it the rigid body and the box collider. So now if I enable it, it will be this small cube that is here on the string, and will follow the string compared to the XR grab object that has stayed in our hand. Again, let's disable the midpoint visual object, and for now, this is it. Now, if you're enjoying this tutorial so far, please leave a like, click the thanks button down below to support the channel. It would really help me a lot. In the next video, we're going to create an arrow that will be shot from our bow when we release the string. See you there!